Austin, you gonna say something?
Sorry, it froze really hard. Who do yesterday's stars think are up at their respective schools? And we are resetting the table here on C2C Live. Campus Canton is live right now. It wouldn't be a C2C Live without some sort of technological error in the background. I think that's a staple of the show at this point. Welcome in, guys. Matt Bruening, Chris Moxley, Austin Nace. We're getting the gang back together here.
Yeah.
So that's exciting stuff. Chris, what are you drinking there?
Oh. And the mutes as well. The mute button's coming in heavy as well today.
This is good. Chris is a little rusty. He hasn't been on C2C Live in a while.
I haven't. It's my lime LaCroix, which is the only flavor of LaCroix that I drink. I won't drink the other flavors. Terrible, awful.
That's one more flavor than I drink. So that's good. That's good. Work. My job has a fridge full of LaCroix, and I'm always like, well, never just bringing my own water, I guess, every day. Thanks for tuning in here, guys. While you're here, why don't you like the video, subscribe here to the channel if you haven't already. We want to get to, let's get to 25 likes here tonight. I know this is a little bit of an earlier time than we usually go live. We're trying to get the geriatric crowd watching too. That's the new group we're going for. But 9:30, they can't stay up that late. So, and neither can we, quite frankly. Home Field Apparel, guys, head on over to Home Field Apparel. Use our promo code over there, Campus, the number 2 Canton, get you 15% off your first purchase. Head on over to Underdog as well. C2C, get you a deposit match up to $250. And CampusToCanton.com. I don't think we have to preach that one too much, but we do have something new at Campus to Canton this week, guys, and that is our freshman supplemental guide, which has released $20 to purchase. It might come with your membership, and if it does, please don't purchase it. Because then we just have to do a bunch of stuff behind the scenes to fix that for you. So without further ado, guys, let's hop into some of this week's topics. The combine happened this past week, and we're not going to talk combine. But they do some interviews with all the players at the combine, and it's always interesting this time of the year hearing these guys get asked, who is the next guy up at your school? And hearing the answers. And sometimes we get a really good answer that turns out to be right. Sometimes we get a bum. But, we still ask the question every single year. We got a couple of names tossed out this year that I think should be on radars. So let's start with James Peoples. He was a freshman running back last year at Ohio State. A couple of guys brought him up, former Buckeyes at the combine, including a quote that he is the next J.K. Dobbins. Matt, fair or foul?
I'm gonna say foul. I don't know that James Peoples is that good. J.K. Dobbins was really, really good for Ohio State, and if I'm remembering correctly, I want to say was injured. I want to say it was true freshman season, and then came back and played really well. Maybe it might have been his sophomore season. I know he was injured early. People weren't sure he was going to come back and play as well as he did. Look, I like Peoples, and I do think he'll be the starting running back. But I believe it was in our Devi Slack channel when someone posted that. I said, man, if they really like James Peoples, wait till they see Bo Jackson running the ball, because I think Bo Jackson is honestly a better running back than Peoples. But I do think he'll be the starter. I do think he's in for probably a good year, but I would not be surprised if this is not some kind of 50-50 split, just like it was with Henderson and Judkins last year. And I just don't think Peoples brings any of the explosiveness or receiving upside that Henderson did. And he's not quite the physical runner, in my opinion, than Judkins was at times. So I'm not sure where he kind of becomes that guy. And I just don't think I don't think he's the running back that J.K. Dobbins was, but I do think he's the next man up.
Would it shock you if I told you that I had James Peoples graded higher than Bo Jackson?
It would, actually. I didn't, but, tomato, to each their own.
Chris, do you think there's a chance that we get an even more run-heavy Ohio State this year with some sort of new, completely inexperienced quarterback stepping in for Will Howard?
I would think so. You're also losing Emeka Egbuka, who just played a huge role in the passing game, and who's the third wide receiver there, I think is a legit question to ask. I think they want to be more run heavy in general. Like that would be my guess, at least breaking in a new quarterback early in the season. So I expect Peoples to see probably 15 touches a game early. Like, is that a lot? Probably not in the grand scheme of things. And talking about like workhorse RBs, but I still think he's going to do pretty good. Like we have him graded okay athletically. Like his burst is like 67th percentile, speed 71st percentile, but that's not a special athlete. So yeah, they'll rely on other guys in this backfield. Like they brought in CJ Donaldson to be probably that more 5 maybe. So he's going to play a smaller back quotations role. I still think it could be valuable.
Matt, over or under 1,000 scrimmage yards for James Peoples this year?
Ooh, man, I'll say under.
Chris?
I mean, go ahead.
You have to assume then that Bo Jackson's going to get a serious run then, right? Like
I don't
probably.
I don't know that it's just yet. I mean, well, if you really think about it, when did Henderson and Judkins hit 1,000 each? It wasn't until the Texas game, I believe. So the third game, no, that was their second game of the playoffs, right? It was Tennessee, then Texas. Granted, I think Ohio State still makes the playoffs, but again, you're talking about, in my opinion, two running backs who are much better than Peoples, and they both hit 1,000 not till the playoffs. I just don't see Peoples getting like 75 to 80% of the carries in the offense. So if that's not the case, I find it hard to think he's going to get there. Because here's the other thing. They play a tougher schedule this year than they did last year. I mean, they start off with Texas. I mean, but I don't know that they're going to be able to run the ball. Offensive line's not going to be as good. I mean, it was good for most of the season until they started getting the injuries, right? But I mean, they get Texas, Washington,
within like
Wisconsin.
week 3, though. Like they just schemed it up, and they'll do it again.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I have reservations about Brian Hartline being the offensive coordinator, and who I think it actually means Ryan Day is going back to play calling, which wasn't the greatest. It was a more balanced offense with Ryan Day than it was at times with Chip Kelly. But I just don't know that we will see the success there that we saw last year. That's just kind of my thing. So I think it's under. I don't think this offense is going to be as good as it was last year in certain areas. And again, the schedule is set. They don't play all these G5 opponents to start the year. I think it's just Grambling State. They get Texas and Washington within the first 4 weeks of the season, and Wisconsin, Penn State early as well. They have a fairly tough schedule this year compared to last year where they were like Marshall and whomever else to start off the season. I mean, Texas is not an easy game. I'm granted it's at home, but still.
I mean, it's Texas Grambling, Ohio. So like,
I thought they played Washington week 3. So it's Ohio, but then Washington.
Week 4,
okay.
Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin. They have Purdue on the schedule, Rutgers. Like those are some bad rush defenses that we saw last year. Are we saying Peoples does it in the 12 games of the regular season? Because I think that's possibly harder because they do rotate backs. Does he do it on the aggregate? I think he might get there.
Yeah, clarify for us, Austin. Are we talking just full season or regular
season? How many playoff games is Ohio State actually playing? I don't know.
This year,
Ohio
I think
State might be a 9-win team this year. I don't know that they're going to be amazing. You know?
I think they make the playoffs. It just comes down to who wins the Big Ten. Because if they get the bye, then they may only get the one game. Do they not? Again, I think they can get to the second round, but I don't think they're national championship contenders by all means this year.
I think I don't think they have much of a chance to make the Big Ten championship game. That might sound crazy.
Who you think
lose a lot?
Penn State, Oregon. I know a lot of.
They lose a lot. It's a lot to replace, and I think we've talked about this. They've not recruited the trenches or just flat out the defensive side of the ball amazingly over the past couple of years. No real big incoming transfers. You lose your two major pass rushers. You lose. Yeah.
Let me correct you for a second. They did recruit defense well. Dan Lanning came in and stole their cookies multiple times last year. They flipped a lot of those top end defensive.
Sounds like they didn't actually recruit well.
I want to give Dan Lanning credit. I want to give Dan Lanning credit on that because they had a bunch of guys that Dan Lanning flipped. So
yeah, I know a couple of deep, a couple corners or whatever. Yeah.
They don't get Oregon in the regular season though, and I think that's huge.
That's
right?
That is a big thing.
Do you think Penn State beats them?
Game. I mean, they haven't been able to yet.
Yeah. I think that's their most likely loss. Like, I don't know. I don't think they do Michigan at the end of the season. I find it hard to believe that Bryce Underwood year one is going to beat them. It's not impossible.
They just lost to a combination of Alex Orangey
yeah,
and
that's what I was about to say. I don't even remember Jack Tuttle. Who was the quarterback? I don't even remember anymore. And they beat him.
Davis Warren.
Yeah, Davis Warren. So yeah, I don't know. Not feeling too great about that.
And I mean, no Chip Kelly. Yeah, I think he's. I think that's a loss.
Well, no Jim Knowles.
No Jim Knowles. Yeah,
Knowles going to. Yep. Oh no, I think under. Regardless if they make the plus, I just don't see them making it to the national championship. I think it's going to be a pretty decent split, regardless of who it is. Whether it's whether they split all of them out, whether it's Donaldson comes in for the short yardage stuff, they use Peoples, and then Bo Jackson. And again, I mentioned in Turbo Rogers that he's the one guy that brings something completely different to that. Do they use him, like try to get him in space and be the receiving back? I think there's going to be a pretty big mix of running backs there that I feel pretty comfortable saying under on 1,000 yards for Peoples.
Okay, so I guess I'll follow it up then. CJ Donaldson over under 450 yards.
Under, because I mean Mike Valerie's in the chat, which I've heard this too. Like they I don't think they're going to use Donaldson as much as people think. I think it is going to end up being Bo Jackson. They seem to love him. I think Donaldson is more of just a depth piece because at the time they signed him, it was just him and Bo. I don't think Turbo Rogers. I don't think Turbo had committed yet. I mean, obviously he ended up committing. He may have. I don't know, but it's not a great room when you're bringing in a second-year guy and then two true freshmen as your running backs, and that's it. I think that's why they went out and got Donaldson. I don't think they're expecting him to do much, to be honest.
I mean, I find it hard to believe he's going to go under 450, but I don't think his range of outcomes is higher than 650. I think the median outcome is probably 500 yards. They're just soft matchups on that schedule where they can trot him out as the 3 and get yardage, like Grambling, Ohio, Purdue. There are opportunities there, even if he's not seeing 10 touches a game. He could probably do it on just those alone. I don't know. Do you know anything about the NIL situation with Donaldson? I don't know what it is, but I find it hard. I don't think that he would leave West Virginia for barely any more money.
I doubt he was making much at West Virginia. West Virginia does not have a robust NIL setup from everything that I've heard.
What is Ohio State paying him? Are they just paying him to be a warm body then? Why bring him in?
Probably. That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. They literally brought him in for depth.
I bet he wasn't making 6 figures at WVU. Or right at 6 figures. If Ohio State offers you 150.
Yeah. I don't know. My other concern with what you're talking about with Grambling, for instance, Grambling State in Ohio, is I wonder if they use it because actually we should back up. We said that we only see Penn State as the only loss. That's good. They could legitimately be 0-1. I don't care that Texas is going up to the shoe. Texas has a good team. They could easily beat Ohio State in week 1.
It's a better roster from top to bottom right now.
So they could be starting 0-1 going into those games. I feel like we're going to go back to what it was with Stroud and McCord in those first couple of games with Day, where he lets them air it out a little bit more to try and get that passing game going. Because right now, what is it? It's just, I always forget about Tate for some reason. It's just Jeremiah and Tate, though. Because, who is it? Shane posted in the chat is in his wide receiver 3. Right now, yeah. I don't think you feel great about your wide receiver core if Brandon Ennis is your wide receiver 3. So, and Julian Sayin, first year starting, I would not be surprised if they're not passing the ball more against those weaker teams to try and get in some kind of rhythm before they hit that Big Ten schedule, which again just means the running backs take us more of a back seat than what they usually do in the offense.
I don't know. It's Grambling. They're going to post 70 points. They're a terrible swag school. I don't know. I just think that Donaldson has some sort of role in that offense. I do. And I think it might be earlier in the season than later in the season. That's when you bring in Bo Jackson and he's awesome. I don't think they want to roll him out immediately. They just don't really have a history of doing that outside of really a special back. And that's Travion Henderson, right? None of these guys are Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins. Yeah. They're just not that good. No offense. I like Peoples, but I don't see it.
I think Peoples has a chance to be a really big, I don't want to call him a post-type sleeper, but I really do think that he can, I think he can be a really good Big Ten starter. So I think he goes over 1,000 total scrimmage yards this year. Because who's the receiving back? I bet he catches 15 to 18 balls next year.
I mean, you say that, but you also got to go back to, what was it, 2 years of Travion Henderson's career where he caught 2 catches, and Mine Williams was only getting a handful as well. He's not afraid to not pass the ball to his running backs.
But didn't we just highlight that they have no third receiver? They have a brand new quarterback no matter what.
At the same time, you had a very talented run. Well, I mean, when they used that was the thing, right? With Travion Henderson's first year, they were using him in that receiving game. It's like, okay, this is. And he was making plays, and then they just stopped doing that for 2 years straight. I don't know exactly what his stats are. I'm almost positive his sophomore year he didn't catch a pass, because all I remember was Felix and he ain't that guy anymore and all that other stuff just because he didn't catch a pass. Like, I would not be surprised if they don't really use somebody in the receiving game.
We'll see. We didn't talk about Max Claw at all there either.
I was going to bring him up. That's their third option.
Yeah.
He's way better than G. Scott is.
How dare you, sir? How dare you? He is, though. Hang on real quick.
Yeah.
I just, why not? Because, where do we think G. Scott gets drafted?
CFL.
Oh, that's kind of
probably
6th round.
The what is the round? European league called? Do they still have that?
I don't think so.
What about the trying to bring it back? League? I heard a rumor that there were talks about that.
I mean, what are you drafting G. Scott to do if you're an NFL team? Like, there's no reason to draft him. Like, they're way better upside picks.
Really good blocker. Really good blocker.
Is he actually?
Yeah, I think so. He was when he was a wide receiver, even more so as a smaller tight end.
Drew Sample got drafted for that, so I don't want
exactly. And he got drafted in like the 3rd round or something like that. Yeah. So it's possible. That's all I'm saying.
It's not impossible.
All right, Oregon's losing a bunch of guys this year as well. And the talk at the combine was the next running backs that are up there. And obviously, Mekhi Hughes was not there last year, so the group can't comment on him specifically. But multiple Oregon players mentioned Jaden Lamar and Dewan Riggs, a player that I'm not really terribly familiar with, was a lowish 3-star last year. That's in there at Oregon. They've said that he looked really, really good in practice as well. They've also got Noah Whittington there. So really, those 4 backs kind of figure to be the 4 that would potentially get any touches this year. I don't know. Are we buying Jaden Lamar and Dewan Riggs, or is this a little bit of the one this year that we probably avoid? Chris?
If you're drafting an Oregon RB2, you're drafting Noah Whittington. Like, I don't know what Jaden Lamar or Dewan Riggs are bringing to your fantasy team, first of all. Like, I think Lamar's had his chance to carve out a role in this offense, and it hasn't happened. Like,
pretty sure he averaged like 3 yards a carry last year or something.
Yeah, like there just isn't an upside for him. And I had honestly never heard of Dewan Riggs ever before you brought up his name. Never heard of him. So that kind of speaks to where I think he sits on the Oregon depth chart. But yeah, I just think it's Mekhi Hughes like full go. I think he's better than Jordan James was. I think he is probably 220 plus touches this year. I just think he's the guy. Knowing Whittington's second, and then Lamar and Riggs are nothing. Like third and fourth string backs.
Yeah. Matt, you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's Mekhi Hughes, and I don't want anybody else. I mean, I guess Whittington maybe if you're in a best ball league, just because he might get you some touchdowns and everything. But yeah, it's all about Mekhi Hughes for me.
Yeah. Who do you? So where I think it would matter though is if Mekhi Hughes gets hurt, right? Because I don't think they want to plug Whittington into that role. So then you're talking Jaden Lamar, who I think is similar to Whittington. I mean, Riggs is 210. I looked him up on Oregon's roster. A little bit bigger. I don't know.
They added that kid from JUCO.
Who's that?
Jay Harris last cycle. I don't think he got much run last year, but like I would assume that he's like 215, 220. Like he's the bigger back. So he's probably the guy that's going to see like those types of touches. I would think. I mean, Lamar is Whittington-ish. Like it'll probably just be rotation, to be honest. But I think Jay Harris is still on the roster. Like he was a guy that they targeted in the portal. I didn't think just for depth, but he's the closest probably physical archetype.
Should have gotten CJ Donaldson, am I right?
Yeah, they should have. Honestly, if Mekhi Hughes
apparently he's cheap, really cheap, and just for depth. So
he is. If Mekhi Hughes gets hurt, I still don't want anybody on Oregon's.
Line Kenyon Sadiq back there.
If Mekhi Hughes goes down, are they screwed a little offensively?
Yeah, probably.
Well, you're talking to the premier Dante Moore skeptic, so
I knew you'd have a good answer, Chris.
I mean, I think they want to run the ball more than they probably have in the last 2 years, but we'll see.
All right, last one up here, guys. Miami loses the entire wide receiver room as we watched Felix discover on a live show that he did a few months ago here on the network. Still, that might be one of my top 3 or 4 moments from the past year or two on the YouTube channel here. It's great stuff. JoJo Trader, their premier freshman wide receiver signing last year, got a little bit of run in the bowl game as we saw, came really, really close to that year 1-0 threshold, didn't quite get there, but is probably the favorite to lead this room this year. Is that, what do we think here, guys? What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, me and you had a conversation about this. I want to say it was maybe a month or so ago, and kind of where we had him ranked. I know I had him. I think I had him in the 40s. You said you had him right around the 60s, I think. I didn't have some of my freshmen in, so he's definitely dropped some since then. But yeah, I mean, I think he goes in and he is the number one. I think, again, my concern really just comes down to what Miami's offense is actually going to look like. I think they were obviously a lot more aggressive passing the ball last year because they had Cam Ward. I don't know that they do that with Beck at quarterback. I've openly stated I still think that I'm a little bit more concerned about what that elbow injury actually is and what that means for him going forward. Just again, as someone who's a big baseball fan and seeing pitchers and everything try to come back from that, I get it's easier apparently to throw a football or less torque, but still, like, I think there's going to be some probably velocity taken off of his throw. And I just don't think Beck's like an overall incredible quarterback to begin with. And I honestly think Mario Cristobal probably goes back a little bit more to Mario Cristobal ball because of what happened last year and them losing those games and not making the ACC championship. So I don't think they passed the ball around enough to make him like a wide receiver 2 for fantasy. But I do think if he is the leading wide receiver for Miami, I think he will be startable at times. And I mean, I think he's a very good player. I think you've mentioned this too recently, Austin, that he might be one of the guys that ends up, I forgot what the word is, like becomes an outlier just because he is so talented and just barely missed that year 1-0, that he might be one of those players who kind of hits that outlier and ends up being productive in the NFL as well.
You know, Mario Cristobal was right there. I just wanted to point that out.
You know, I'm not smart. All right. So just
Chris.
Yeah, I actually agree with the sentiment that of all the freshmen last year, and maybe in the last couple classes, I think Trader has the best shot at breaking the traditional year 1-0 mold. It was a really talented Miami room last year. And I don't know that he wouldn't have gotten there if Cam Ward didn't sit out the second half of the bowl game. Like, I really think that he was going to get there. And right, there are outliers, and I think chasing outliers in general is a good thing. And there's a reason that, like, we think that this theory has legs because over time it's proven successful. And yeah, we have outliers to this theory, right? DK Metcalf, Jarvis Landry, etc. The Nico Collins is one of the most recent ones. I think Trader could get there. I'm not projecting it on him, but I think that he is probably one of the higher cases to break that trend. That said, I don't know what this Miami wide receiver room is going to look like at all, really. Like, CJ Daniels is the other outside wide receiver, was really disappointing at LSU last year.
Was he the one that Brian Kelly was often seen on the sidelines yelling at?
I thought that was Chris Hilton.
I couldn't remember which one it was. And Anderson, they're all shaped the same. Yeah. Like last year, did be something. I was like, "Oh, was that Anderson? Was that Hilton? Was that Daniels?" You can never tell.
Yeah. I think the better question is what wide receiver Brian Kelly didn't yell at. That's probably the easier one to figure out.
I mean, the man said he was going to kill his whole team after a game one time. Let's not. I don't think anybody's off limits here for the guy.
That is very fair.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, CJ Daniels there were injuries there. He was not productive first year in the SEC. Like, is this a step down a little bit? Helps. I don't know. I would project JoJo Trader to lead the room in receiving. I share some concerns about Beck's injury. I was more concerned maybe like 2 or 3 months ago based on conversations that like I've had with people who seem to think that he's going to be okay to start the season. Are those Miami people who have a lot riding on it? Probably. But who else is in this room that you're even interested in? Like besides those two, is it Josh Moore? Like we kind of like him in the freshman guy, but we don't like him that much. Like, do we think he's an impact player year one? He's definitely got to be on the outside. He's like 6'4", 210, 205. Like, where's the room for him? Is Daniels going to be the guy? I don't know. We just saw it that season. Like, I seem to think that it's going to be Trader. I just don't know where else that production comes from. Do you think it's coming from the slot? Because I don't even know who their slot receivers are.
It's probably Ray Joseph or whatever, right? Is that their slot guy? Or is it? Yeah, probably.
They got Malachi Toney, right?
Yeah, true freshman, right? I guess there were already quotes about him coming out because Miami has started camp or like has had workouts. They've had something going on. I saw Nate was asking this week about what we thought of Malachi Toney and Joshua Moore. We're like, nah, not a lot. I mean, they're fine.
Toney could be the slot guy year one, but I know we don't love him, so I don't know. How did Miami get this bad of a receiving room? How much money they had and are investing into the program? That's a question that I want to ask. Like, you couldn't retain Isaiah Horton?
I believe Austin said before they don't have as much money as people think they do. Isn't it just the crypto guy? Like, isn't that literally the only person?
Bitcoin's down from where it was, so
that's probably it right there.
Yeah,
they just need some meme coins.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, they don't have as much money. They have the thing about Miami that I think people don't really realize is they have it's just not a big school. Like, they don't have a huge alumni base. You know, it's and they don't have a lot of athletic interest in that alumni base. Like, overall, like, it just isn't a terribly robust. Like, a lot of the interest on Miami is like outside people, like the people that are 40 and think cocaine's still cool. Like, that's the people that love Miami, and I don't know if they have a lot of money because they're spending it on coke. So, you know, right there, it's a dilemma at that point.
It doesn't help that your stadium's 45 minutes away from your campus. Like, that's never really going to help. And I mean, how many times is it empty with no students don't want to travel? Like, there's a lot of better things to do in Miami than watch Mario Cristobal not know how to coach on the sideline or no 2-minute rules. Like, there are better things to do in Miami.
Are there? So, is Miami one of those towns where there's better things to do?
There's stuff to do.
It's the city that you don't sleep.
I didn't know that, you know?
Yeah, I don't know that we need to jump too much into the Beck stuff, but Chris, you and I actually spoke with somebody a couple of weeks ago who said that they had spoken to some of the Georgia wide receivers from last year. They didn't have a lot of nice things to say about Carson Beck. No, he's a little distracted at times. And for a guy that's doing a major rehab right now at Miami, you know, I don't know.
Park your car in a garage, by the way. Like, how are you going to get like a...
Agreed.
What does he drive? A
Lamborghini?
Lamborghini?
You can just street park that, right? I mean, just
you can't just be street parking Lamborghinis.
It's like, Miami, Chris. What are you talking about? There's a Lamborghini at every house. Come on now.
I heard that was the zip ride down there. It's just a Lamborghini. You just hop in and off you go.
Well, him and his girl probably got matching ones.
No, I think hers was something. No, hers was something different that got stolen. I can't remember what it was. Wasn't it like a Range Rover,
a Rolls Royce or something?
Vespa.
Look. All I'm gonna say, I'm gonna defend the man a little bit. I'd be distracted too. Let's just be honest.
All right, we'll let Matt have the final word on that. We have mentioned already that we dropped the freshman and supplemental guide this week. Head on over to campus2canton.com and check that out. It is a labor of love for us every single year. 210 pages of just, you know, really, really good information. We added some additional data stuff this year. I think you'll really, really like it if you haven't checked it out yet. Useful for a lot of different contexts, I think. You know, CFF Dynasty, you know, supplemental drafts, C2C drafts, Debbie drafts to an extent, all of that good stuff. When we got our first supplemental first round mock that has come out since we actually dropped the guide, mostly members of C2C.com have hopped in here. They like I said, they've gotten through the first round. The only caveat, a little bit different than what we did with the guide. In the guide, our supplemental players are all players that are rostered less than 10% on Fantrax. They upped the threshold to 20% here. in this to allow for some guys. Demond Williams, I think, might be in that pool now. Maybe Joseph Williams. A couple of those kind of names that we've talked a little bit about this offseason as guys to pay attention to are all included in the player pool here. And I just want to read off the first round of names here, guys, and let's react a little bit to what we see here. 101, Bryce Underwood. I think that's chalk for this offseason. I'd be pretty surprised if you don't see 85 to 90%. Bryce Underwood at 101. 102, Keelan Russell, the true freshman, headed to Alabama, fresh off his Elite 11 victory. DeCorian Moore, the top wide receiver, and really the only wide receiver we love this year, headed to Oregon at 103. Hussein Longstreet headed to USC at the 104, quarterback there. 105, Deuce Knight, quarterback, headed to Auburn. 106, Usman Kroma, our top-rated running back, headed to Florida State. 107, Tavian St. Clair, kind of the last of the big five quarterbacks, headed to Ohio State. 108, Shakai Mills-Knight, a freshman running back, headed to Ole Miss that we like quite a bit. Emmett Mosley, the only non-freshman taken here. Stanford, rising sophomore wide receiver, had that big end to the year last year. Bo Jackson at 10. We mentioned him earlier in the Ohio State equation. How much does he play this year? The 111 is Khalil Lockett, a freshman wide receiver headed to Texas. They empty out a lot of production there. And then Taylor Taylor, Georgia freshman running back or wide receiver. So a little bit of risky there taking Georgia freshman wide receivers in the first round. I don't know, Chris, thoughts, reactions to these top 12?
So I was at 3 in this mock, and I took DeCorian Moore, and I was happy to be at 3 because I think 1, 2, 3, huge tier break, like a canyon, like a Grand Canyon of tier breaks. I just think those 3 are so far above everybody else that I would actively be trying to acquire those picks, not trying to trade back. I think Underwood's probably going to go 1 in every draft too. But if you're not going to take Underwood, I think you take DeCorian Moore. I don't know that you would take Keelan Russell over Bryce Underwood. I think from a C2C perspective, right? CFF, I think you can make a little bit different of an argument. But after that, I mean, I'm looking at the next 6 guys in the draft, and I'm saying Longstreet, Knight, St. Clair, Kroma, those are kind of all the same valuation of player. I don't know that there's a big tier between any of them. I wouldn't take Kroma quite that high, and I really do like Kroma, but I don't know that he's all that different than Shakai Mills-Knight, who we really like. We're higher on than the services. I don't know he's that much different than Bo Jackson. Hot, we like him, right? But it really thins out really quick. It's just not a great class in terms of non-quarterbacks, because I mean every pick in the top 7 but 2 was quarterback. So that kind of tells you.
What do you think of the Emmett Mosley placement here, Matt?
I don't like it.
No. Okay.
Well, so I don't, but then at the same time, I'm looking at,
who else?
Rankings, and I'm kind of well, I'm really high on Jerome Miles, but again, I get maybe not wanting to take him because of the injury. I still think if he is healthy, obviously he's staying in high school to run track. So my thought process on that is his leg is at least somewhat healthy. I think once he gets to Texas A&M, he's talented enough to get onto the field. I'm just curious to see what Mosley is. I feel like this is the I don't want to love me some Mike Valerie, but I feel like this is who is that running back that everybody was just hyping up because he ran for 900 yards in the snow and everybody said he was going to be the next big thing, and then he just didn't. Abu Sama. I feel like Emmett Mosley is the Abu Sama, but of the wide receiver position this year. He's only had a couple really good games. I don't know that Stanford. I would love to see Stanford's offense be good this year. I think Elijah Brown at quarterback could get him the ball, but I don't know. I haven't necessarily been that impressed with Mosley. I don't know that I'd be taking him in the first round of a supplemental draft personally.
So I hated it at first. I was like, that's too high for Emmett Mosley. I don't really have a strong opinion on him either way. I think he's probably a little overvalued, but I'm not sure I want Khalil Lockett over him. I'm not sure I want Taylor Taylor over him. I think it's so y'all have talked about it more on the official and some of the recruiting calls that we have that are NIL members only, which I think are really interesting conversations about Jerome Miles. I don't know that it's good that he's running track. Like I would much rather have him heal up from an ACL and like be on campus at Texas A&M than like that's quite a few injuries, and like that isn't a normal recovery timeline. Like yeah, medicine's getting better, but like is it that much better? I don't know. So is he going to just run track because he's a really good track athlete and wants to like prove it? That idea is great in terms of wanting a dude who's like a dog, but like it's a little scary. I just don't know that I could take him in the first round. And I think Mosley is a fine pick over him. The player that didn't go here that I was surprised didn't go is Joseph Williams. I think he's right alongside with him and Mosley for me.
I mean, that's the thing. I was about to. Yeah, I was also going to bring that up too. I mean, there's two names you mentioned earlier that fell within that 20% threshold in Joseph Williams and DeMond Williams. I would take both of them over Emmett Mosley easily.
Was DeMond available, Chris? Was he? I know there was discussion.
I think we ruled that it was unlikely that he would be available most drafts, so I don't think he was
because of the C2C league.
Okay. Yeah, he was. I mean, but with DeMond Williams, he doesn't have NFL upside really. Like that's not a player I don't think you're projecting to the NFL. Probably.
True, but I mean, I think what he could bring you at the CFF side is more upside than I don't know. Maybe I'm just too low on Emmett Mosley. I don't think he's got a super exciting NFL future ahead of him either. So
he was just so productive.
He was.
It's kind of hard to know how good he was.
I've been going back and forth on him this offseason. I actually have him as my wide receiver 37 overall, and that might be a tiny, tiny bit low. I've got him around.
That's way lower than consensus would tell you based on him going in the top 10.
Yeah. And but I mean, looking at this draft, I mean, I don't know in a supplemental where, because I think draft strategy, we talked a little bit about this and I don't want to get too far into the weeds here. I think draft strategy in a supplemental as opposed to a startup are two really different strategies. And in a class this year where I'm less sold on a lot of the freshmen in a supplemental draft, I might be more interested in taking Mosley, where in a startup where I probably have a broader range of players that I consider similarly talented or probably more talented, I'm probably more likely to dip into that pool of player in that scenario and not be super interested in him. So for this exercise, I think it's okay, but I actually have him above Joseph Williams by 2 spots in my ranking. So, but I've got them, right side by side. I don't know that, not to veer too far off here, I don't know that Colorado is the same kind of playground for wide receivers this year that it has been the past couple of years. For a lot of different reasons, but just, I mean, the first one, just, I think Canton Salter isn't Shedeur Sanders, he just isn't. So, Alan
Decker would disagree with you.
I don't know what that offense is even going to look like. They can't run the ball. I don't know that the offensive line will be noticeably better this year again. So like, where's that coming? I don't know. I don't know where the offense come from this year. But if you're asking Canton Salter to throw the ball 50 times a game, I think you're in pretty serious trouble. So I think it caps guys like Joseph Williams.
I think you're drafting Williams for the NFL. Like I don't think you're drafting him just for CFF. Like I think that's a bad pick if that's what you think of him. And if that's what you think of him, fine, don't take him there. Like I get that, right? Like you could take a player who I think has very similar archetype, probably going to be just as productive or more productive in Yannick Smith about 6 rounds later. So
I'm real hesitant on those G5 to P5 guys. Now I do think that Joseph Williams has some stuff working for him. Really raw, and not raw as in like he just, like some of these guys are just raw because they don't know how to play football coming into college. Like he switched positions very, very late in his high school career, has barely really played any wide receiver. We think he's probably a better athlete once we start getting some more updated measurements on him than our database currently has him at. But like, I'm just real skeptical on those G5 to P5 guys or G5 to P4 at this point. I'm not a huge buyer on any of those guys.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I don't know what other wide receivers you're taking there. I really don't. And that's a reflection of this incoming class, not necessarily the player pool.
I have Chase Sal in a similar category as them. I'd probably be more interested in Chase Sal than Joseph Williams.
He's got to be rostered in more leagues, though, right? Because he was crazy productive in the middle of the season last year. Maybe not.
I don't actually know. I don't know I have to look and see what his Fantrax rostership is. I know he was rostered in some of my leagues because he was like, I drafted him somewhat at the end of drafts last year, and then he didn't do anything the first couple of weeks. And I don't remember if I dropped him places. Like, I know I still have him on a couple teams, but like there might be places where that kind of happened, where he kind of got cut and just sat there. What do you have his rostership number?
What was that? 24%.
Okay, so a little bit over, but I mean, he's probably still sitting out there in quite a few leagues. I mean, that would be one that would intrigue me potentially, depending on your team. I don't know. What about Ian Strong? You like Ian Strong going to or Rutgers kid?
I think I'd rather take the bet on Joseph Williams. Like, I am an Ian Strong guy. Like, I think that there's some real upside there.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, are the profiles all that different? And Joseph Williams did as a freshman, and like Caden Salter versus Ethan Kaliakmanis throwing. Again, Joseph Williams is competing with probably two better wide receivers in like Draylon and Marion Miller. But again, like I think at this point, if you're drafting that type of player in the top 10 picks, top 12 picks, you believe that there's legitimate NFL upside there. Like he's not a late day 3 pick. Like he's a round 2 potential pick. Like, even if it's not projecting that way currently, like you can see that or make that story. I tend to think Strong has that too, but like it just feels early.
Can I go back to 2 things real quick?
Sure, please do.
Do whatever your little heart decides.
Curious, Chris, you said that you would only probably take Decorian Moore over Underwood. I think I disagree with that. I would be fine taking Keelan Russell as the number 1 pick. I mean, I think while obviously Bryce Underwood we had graded higher than him, and I think overall the upside is there. I mean, I still think there's a shot Keelan Russell starts day 1 for Alabama. Brett asked in the chat, does him or Ty Simpson start? I still think it's going to be Keelan Russell. I just do not think Ty Simpson is good. And I think there's a realistic shot with Kalen DeBoer is his offensive coordinator, Ryan Williams there, wide receiver. If they can continue to put weapons around him, I think there's a realistic shot Keelan Russell is more productive in college. And I still think out of all those things, I argue him. I still think Houston Longstreet can get there, but if I had to bet between the 2 of them, or if there was like 2 quarterbacks that could go number 1 in a couple of years, I think it's Keelan Russell and Bryce Underwood. I don't think Keelan Russell's that far off of Bryce Underwood. I would not have an issue with someone taking him at 1 over Underwood.
I think you're just inviting more risk than you need to, but I understand it. Like, I think if you were to project safety in terms of what quarterback has a more likely outcome of ending up as a top 10 pick, I think it's Bryce Underwood. And I think those, like, I understand the upside for Keelan Russell, especially in college, right? Like working with Kalen DeBoer. Like, he isn't some like fantastical runner. Like, he's not Houston Longstreet. He's not like a guy who's going to get you 1,000 yards on the ground. It's very, very unlikely. So that upside,
I think he's a better rusher than Longstreet for what it's worth.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, because he's like better athletically in terms of like long speed, or like, he shows less willingness to do it.
See, I think he shows more when he has to. He just could bomb it to Decorian Moore the first sign of trouble last year, and then that was fine. I think he's more willing, and I think he's better at it, even if he's a little slighter. Like, he's got kind of the Jaden Daniels thing going on, but
I guess that's fair.
Like, from a build perspective, I'm not saying that he's that level for rushing.
He has added 15 pounds since getting to Alabama, allegedly. That makes me feel pretty good. But I don't know. I think I would just take the guy who I feel is safer and just find similar upside from college fantasy perspective later in drafts. That's just kind of how I roll. But the only reason that I just don't think you should take Russell over Moore in a C2C league or a Devy league. My personal preference. But if I'm going to take a different position, it would be Decorian Moore. And I would still have the quarterback strength the same. But I get it. Like, I understand the upside with Russell. And he's our quarterback too. And it's kind of, there's kind of a big gap between him and Underwood for us. But it's not like a significant gap. Like, they're both still tier 1 running upper and tier 1 quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have an issue with Moore going over him. I think I see an argument for any of those 3 to go number 1, and I'm fine with whatever that person wants to do. I mean, my biggest fear with Moore, and I think Austin, you've brought this up, is we've seen, I mean, this is Lanning's 4th year as the head coach of Oregon. Name of all the high-end wide receivers they've gotten, and granted, I think you could argue Decorian Moore is the best of them. Name the one that's been really productive, including them even bringing in Evan Stewart last year and completely just crap the bed. Like, in an offense that's been good. I mean, Tez Johnson's gone out there and been incredible. They've had other wide receivers go out there and look really good. I'm not going to hold Jerry on Dickey against him too much because, I mean, that guy was raw coming in, but like they haven't really developed those guys. So that would be my one concern with Moore. And I want to, I can't remember. I want to say it was Cover 3 that pointed this out. It might have been Bud Elliott that pointed out that if you go back and look at Dan Lanning's history as well at Oregon, they have not started a true freshman wide receiver except for once in a bowl game. That is it. That's kind of a concerning thing as well, despite how that room seems wide open and Decory Moore having a chance to step in, you would think, and produce in year one.
You know, Oregon's also literally only recruited one wide receiver we thought was worth a damn over the past 4 cycles.
Fair.
Which was Dickey, who was damaged goods. So,
yeah.
You know, Kyler Casper, Justice Lowe, like you just go through the list of guys they brought in, like. We kind of liked McClellan, but we were like, he's probably not going to play there.
Yeah, I mean, he went from a bad situation at Ohio State to a bad situation at Oregon. Like he just wasn't going to start at either one of them. Real quick, I want to address what Shane said in the chat that he said, I think if Simpson was good, he would have started last year, but DeBoer didn't want to upset Bama fans by not starting Milroe. I completely disagree with that. I mean, Nick Saban sat Jalen Milroe to start Ty Simpson, and Ty Simpson was so bad they went back to Milroe after them saying he should be what did they say he should play again? I forgot what Bill O'Brien said. Running back or cornerback, something like that. I don't think Kalen DeBoer was attached to any of those guys. I think he just played who he thought was best, which I think is concerning for Ty Simpson.
Bill O'Brien wasn't wrong.
You're right. He wasn't. So what does that say about Ty Simpson that he couldn't?
I'm out. Listen, I'm out on Ty Simpson.
That's all I'm saying.
I was there. I'm out. Ty Simpson experience is over. The Austin Mack experience, like we are so far past that.
Yeah.
It's not going to be Austin Mack.
I just think, because it's not just Shane that's saying, there's a lot of people saying, oh, they had to start Milroe. I disagree. And I think if Ty Simpson was really that dude, he would have gotten his shot. I just don't think he's it. So that's why I think Russell has a true chance to start this year.
I think Keelan Russell starts more games than Ty Simpson does.
I agree.
I don't think that's crazy at all. I just think maybe they go Simpson, then give it to Mack and see if he has any juice. I don't think he does. I think if you want to win games, you probably need Keelan Russell.
God, I don't think you can go Simpson, Mack, Russell.
Yeah, because I mean, if you do that,
Simpson, Russell.
If you do that, what are you, a 7-win team, 8-win team at that point? I don't see them. If they do that, I think that means your team you're bottoming out. You're playing horribly.
Mack is not a FBS level player, so I don't think Mack plays. Just
the only person in the country who seems to like him is Kalen DeBoer, right? Like
Colin Decker. No. I'm going to back this up. No, I won't throw other people. There were people who argued in our company Slack that because he followed Kalen DeBoer to Alabama, he was going to be the guy. And it was not just Colin Decker. And those of you, I'm looking in the camera. I hope you're looking at this, watching this live. If you're not listening, I'm looking right at you in the camera. You know who you are. And you should be ashamed of yourselves. That's all I'm going to say.
I am ashamed of myself.
What is it that you guys, Chris, I think you said earlier you haven't watched a ton of Mosley. Austin, what is it you think Mosley is going into the NFL? Where do you picture him playing?
I don't want to just say slot, but I think he is kind of a possession receiver.
Okay.
Like, I don't know that he's an amazing athlete. He's okay. The hands are fine. So here's part of the thesis with this, and I think this is not really scientific, but I'm just not super, super interested in like a sub top 100 wide receiver in his class who broke out at Stanford. Like, that's just not like, now if he does it again for another year and then maybe I'm too late to buy, but like the price is already pretty high. You know, I don't know that you're getting a discount on him at Mosley at this point. So there are, like I said, there are some instances where maybe I would take him, a supplemental, just, if I don't like the other players, but in a startup, I don't think I would even think about Emmett Mosley. Like, I just think he wouldn't even cross my mind until somebody else drafted him.
I want to go back. I'm going to go back to a topic and come back to Mosley because I have another question about him. Yes, Shane, Ryan Grubb did recruit Austin Mack at Washington, though. Different level of talent going to Washington than Alabama, also playing different defenses and everything. I think we can let that dream go.
I'm not even sure who would be the guy at Washington, by the way.
Yeah, I think
I'm going to push back against that too. Like I was in on him, and then I saw a little bit, and I was like, this dude is very good. Yeah, I just don't think he's going to start for Alabama.
I mean, he's crazy inexperienced. He has like a year of football under
He reclassified up a class, right?
He only played his junior year, and then he reclassified up. Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about this a lot. Not only is that not worked out for every quarterback that's done that, it's also really not worked out for quarterbacks who've only played 1 year. Even going back to, Tyler Buckner at Notre Dame, right? Who ended up more because of injuries, but everybody loved him because of his rushing upside and everything. Really only played 1 year in high school football, and look at what happened. Like, it's just not really worked out for those guys. It's something people talk about all the time. You need reps at quarterback to get better, and he has not had a ton.
Yeah, I think it's too late for him.
Yeah. I guess my concern with Moxley is you guys said he's uber productive. Maybe I'm just being too harsh, but like 500 yards is not uber productive to me.
I mean, he really only played like 6 games. So
no, he played in 9 games.
Yes, I know, but the first couple he didn't run like a ton of routes, if I remember correctly.
He had 7 catches against Clemson. It was probably his best game, I think, arguably outside of the 168.
Are you arguing for or against him? Because that seems like
a against him. For him. I mean, he only got 48 yards. Granted, it was against a good Clemson defense. Outside of one game against, who was it, Louisville, where he put up 168 yards, he was not that productive. And I just don't see a 6'2", 190 guy who played mainly in the slot as a guy who's really going to garner a ton of NFL interest outside of like day 3. It's not a guy that I'm betting on. So again, and my only argument is I don't think he should go in the first round. I would rather take a shot. As much as I've argued against this over the years with Malachi Nelson and everything, I would much rather take a shot on one of these freshman players and see if they hold their value over a guy like I just think it's a day 3 NFL player. And I don't think he's going to be uber productive for you CFF wise in the Stanford offense. So like, I think you're just kind of throwing away a pick, taking him at a top 12 pick in a freshman supplemental draft. Like, give me Matt Zollers. That's probably way too early for Zollers and way too early for this other quarterback. Give me Jaron Kiave Sagapuatele. Like, give me someone who's going to hold value that could possibly trade later on. I know, Austin, you always argue don't do that, but like, I just don't see the upside with taking Moxley in the first round. That's my biggest thing with him.
Sagapuatele might not be the guy that I would advocate to draft if you want him to
that's
hold
fair.
Value. There's just a real chance that he just gets Dante Moore this year at Cal, frankly. So.
But that value doesn't go anywhere. Don't worry.
I mean, it does.
It does unless you end up at Oregon. Although, he already was at Oregon. I don't know if he can go back. Yeah. How does that work?
I mean, again, look, like I think
sometimes to move forward, you need to go back.
I think Austin and I talked about this recently on The Official. Like, I mean, you say what you want, but like Malachi Nelson, even after he did not win his job and went to Boise State, his value spiked back up some. So like, it stays there as much as I think that may be kind of stupid at times. Like, it stays there with these quarterbacks as long as it appears that they have a chance to win the job.
I'm not going to argue with you on Emmett Moxley. I don't think he's a first round selection either, but I would guess more often than not he's a top 15 selection in freshman supplemental drafts. There are at least a handful of people in every single league that think really highly of him. So like, even if you don't believe that, someone does. I'm not sure I'm there either, but I think that's going to be reality of where he goes. And I think I get it, right? Like, his last 3 games were the ones that you want to talk about. And that one was against Louisville when they were kind of reeling and playing a horrible game against Stanford. And then San Jose State. Like, I understand.
All right. Mailbag. We did ask for a couple of questions from subscribers over at campus2canton.com in the Discord over there. Discord is for members only. And if you are a member, I mean, there's so many people that are members that are not in there. There's a lot of good discussion to be had, especially because most of us don't really post on social media that much anymore. Our thoughts, unfiltered for the most part, land right in there. So I would definitely check that out if you're a member. Longtime listener Luke says college football has changed lately and will continue to change. The ACC lawsuit is coming to an end here, which ultimately kicks the can down the road for Clemson, Florida State, and a few others to potentially leave the ACC around 2030. If you were the president of football operations for all G5 teams, so like a commissioner essentially, what are you doing from now until 2030 to make the G5 as successful as possible? And you can pick whatever successful means to you.
Can I go first?
Yeah, please, Matt. Commissioner Matthew.
I feel like I've talked about this before for years, before even the playoff actually came to existence in for the P4 now, I guess, is I would create my own playoff format for the G5. And I think that's going to drive a lot of interest toward the end of the year because, again, it's going to be similar competition going up against each other. We watch these bowl games. I mean, I can't remember. Again, I know this was cover 3. They talked about it again this year, that the ratings were off the chart for bowl games as well, again this year, which I don't think anybody expected, especially with the playoff coming in. I think everybody probably would have expected we pivot toward those playoffs. So I would build a playoff for that. I don't know how you do it if you want to. That part, like whether you want to combine conferences, you want to keep it 12 team like that as well. But like I would do that because I think you will get some TV network to pay for a G5 playoff format. And then whether you spread that money out through all the G5 conferences as well, that allows you to get more NIL into some of these schools so they can possibly keep some of their players instead of them transferring all up to the P4, whether that helps you in the recruiting at the high school level to bring in these players. Like, I think that's the best way to get money flowing in to these G5 schools. So that's what I would do. And I think as long as you're able to do that and keep those schools around and keep the money flowing in, I think that's a success. Because at some point, I would not be surprised if that playoff turns into, I mean, realistically, they're disrespecting the G5 as it is, and that you get one spot, whoever the highest rated G5 is, and they're likely expecting that team to get knocked out in the first round every time anyways. They're already talking about taking or making it to a point where the G5 team can't get a bye. So why not just say, screw the P4, we're going to do our own thing? And I guarantee it may not garner as much interest and maybe as many eyeballs that were on the P4 playoff, but I guarantee it will be just as good. Put it on different days of the week during during the winter time, whenever it starts up. I forgot when it started this year. Was it like mid-December, second week of December is when the college football playoff started? Like, put the G5 on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, when nobody has anything to watch, and people will tune in and watch it. You'll make a lot of money.
Did you watch any of the FCS playoffs this year, Matt?
FCS? No, I don't care about the FCS, but I do care about G5.
That's the same reaction you're going to get for the G5 playoff. It's just the reality of the sport. In my opinion, I think this is an impossible job. I think being the commissioner, president, whatever of all of the G5 is basically impossible given how many different stakeholders there are and what level of athletic programs exist from the top and the bottom. Like, it's one thing to be the commissioner or the president of a G5 school, and on the low end, you're dealing with like a Vanderbilt. It's another thing when you're dealing with like a Liberty and a Tulane versus an FIU, a Delaware, a Missouri State. Like, we're talking about programs who need to be like subsidized, basically. I don't know what the answer is to that disparity, but I think what the number one thing is, and you touched on this at the beginning, is you need to figure out a way to drive two things, which is television revenue. Like, you need to get some sort of TV deal locked in, and maybe that is a playoff. I don't know that the viewership is going to be even close, but maybe it could be enough to subsidize some of this. I don't know. I think the second thing is there needs to be some sort of grassroots program in terms of getting and turning out fans to games. And maybe that is a strategy that works at a conference level better. It's really a school-based strategy, right? But the grassroots organization of NIL, grassroots organization of getting fans literally into games, like attendance sucks for some of these schools. I wish I had an answer of what that looked like, because I think there's so much disparity between these programs. But those are going to be the two ways that you're getting any traction whatsoever. Like, I remember a couple of years ago when McIntyre was at FIU and he was saying that like the program had no money whatsoever. Like, how do you compete at that point? I think the answer is there needs to be some sort of revenue sharing and TV deals that help equalize. But I don't know. I sound like a downer because I don't know that there's an answer. But I don't know that there's going to be equal revenue sharing either, because why should there be? We just saw this lawsuit. I think the answer is grassroots organization. That's your best approach.
I mean, I don't think the G5's as bad off as it sounds. I mean, I'm just doing quick research here on this, but what is typically considered good viewership numbers for any kind of program, including sporting event, is a few million viewers. I just looked it up. The MAC, through most of last year, averaged just under 1 million viewers for their weekly games. That's the MAC. during the week when they came back. What because I know they started earlier this year than previous years. Was it October? I think is when they started doing their midweek games, like Tuesday, Wednesdays, maybe late October, something like that. Where again, I think if you're the G5 and you're able to, if you do that, if you keep yourself separate, right, and do stuff during the week, I think you can garner in numbers. Again, I don't think it's going to be, the Power Four playoffs. It's not going to be like even if I'm not talking Alabama, Georgia matchup, go Vanderbilt, like you just mentioned, Chris. Like, you're still not going to get the viewers Alabama, Vanderbilt does. But if you can get those kind of numbers where it's close to a minute, I think it said average just under 900,000, whatever, like that's going to, I think, a TV station or program, whatever, will pay for those rights, and that will bring money into the G5, which is the main thing I think you need to do. Did you watch any of the CUSA midweek games last year? Because they were on. I don't know if it was cute. I watch games all throughout the week, but again, I think we're talking to the wrong people here because we're watching those almost regardless. But like, I think you can. The thing is, I think you can bring in what's the word? The casual. If you attach playoff to the name, casual fans will tune in. Now, I'm not saying they'll stay for the whole playoff, but they'll tune in because like, oh, Marshall versus Liberty in a playoff matchup. Okay, let's see what this is like. Again, the football's not going to be as great as a P4 matchup, but if you can even convert two of those people every week into that, like it's just more and more viewership, more and more money. That's the main thing I think you need to do for the G5. I'm not saying it's going to be as successful as anything the P4 does, but I think that's the quickest way to turn that around instead of just getting one team into the playoff and hoping for the best, because it's a playoff share between all those teams, right? So, I mean, you're only really giving one G5 team some kind of money every year that makes it in. It just doesn't help the entire G5, whatever you want to call it, conference, group, whatever.
Austin, your thoughts?
I go back and forth because I don't know that a playoff will work because I think people will just opt out. Someone said in the comments here, like the NIT. I mean, the NIT, I don't know. Like I do follow college basketball pretty closely. This year I haven't followed it as closely. It's just been a busy year for me. The NIT is just like totally irrelevant now. Like literally nobody gives a crap about it because like teams turn it down. Pitt got invited to NIT last year. They probably would have been a 1 seed. They like teams would just say like, I don't want to play. I know that a little bit of a different, the G5 teams would probably say, yes, but that's just like nobody cares about these like not premier tournaments. Like I just think it's at the point where it's like, this isn't I swear this isn't me trying to be like a boomer or like do anything like that, but everything today is so much more like, how can I preserve my value? And probably rightfully so for a lot of these guys. But so like, I just wanted to play one more game with my teammates. Like that just doesn't really happen anymore. Like nobody gives a shit. I mean, I wouldn't. So
I think the NIT is not a good example because of the difference between that as well in March Madness is what is this, like 68 teams that get in now. So you're really not getting any kind of decent competition into the NIT. What I would compare it to, and I will say still not as big a deal and wasn't at first, but is becoming a bigger and bigger deal, at least to the teams that win this stuff, is Austin. You're a big soccer fan as well. The Europa League and the Europa Conference League. They don't matter nearly as much as the Champions League. Champions League gets probably millions of more viewers than those two. But when your team is in those conference, in the Europa Conference League and the Europa League, you're watching, you're hoping they win it. I think it's not going to be like that to start out because I don't think either one of those leagues were as well. But as it continues to grow and you continue to build that every year, that trophy will matter more, whether it's a G5 champion, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think players will opt out. It's not going to happen immediately. It is going to take time, and it's never going to be. It's always going to be little brother. You just have to accept that.
Why I don't necessarily like that parallel either, and that's why this is like just like a totally different environment than a lot of these other sports, is that there is a financial incentive in those and an incentive that if you win, for anybody that doesn't know, like there's basically 3 tiers of like continental competition essentially. And like the Champions League is like the top, and then the Europa League is like kind of below that. And then the Conference League is a little below that. And if you win yours, you get an automatic bid into the next one next year. In college football now, with how heavy roster turnover is, I don't think teams care about that. Like you're not thinking, I'm definitely going to be here next year. How cool would it be to automatically get a spot for Tulsa in the playoff next year? Like, I just don't think they care about that. Because again, I think most of these guys aren't like, if you're good, you're not planning on staying at Tulsa. Like,
I
no offense to
agree.
Tulsa.
But I also think we're talking about a very limited amount of players that can actually make that transfer up like that when you're talking about. Whereas, again, I think it will matter to some. Like, again, the difference I think with that is the NIT, like, does anybody actually celebrate winning the NIT? Well, I use the Europa League, and more so the Europa League. I don't think people really celebrate winning the Conference League, but it's there. With that, if you win the G5 and you get your championship ring or whatever, like, you at least have something. Like, let's be honest. Let's just love my guy Felix, but I mean, he talks about his national championships that he got at oh God, why did I forget his Grand Valley? Like, yeah. When you win stuff like that, like, it matters to you. It truly does. And I'm not saying that should even guarantee you a spot in the playoff. I know, again, they talk about having that G5 thing. I just think having something that you can play for will matter more to players. And again, if you can bring the revenue in, it's just a win-win for you. Because right now it's just a bowl game. And okay, cool. Yeah, I won the Pop-Tarts Bowl and I get to see a person in a Pop-Tarts who go into the toaster and then you get to eat. Like, that's cool and all. But like, if you actually have a championship you're competing for, I actually think that will matter more, because let's be honest, 99% of those G5 guys are not going to make it out of the G5. So it gives them something.
They're going to be going pro in something other than sports.
Exactly. And how great would it be to be sitting there and be like, I'm a G5 champion and wearing your championship ring as you're doing someone's taxes? That's not meant as any disrespect to anybody.
I wish I had a championship ring to wear while I did people's taxes.
Right. My last thought on it is the perfect category is the FCS playoffs. Nobody watches that. And like, I'm speaking unless either of y'all watched it.
No,
like,
I did not.
I feel like we would be the biggest target market for those sports, right? Like, think about one level up of people who watch college football. Like, I just don't know that there's a market there for them. Like, someone will televise it, but you might get it on like the CW. ESPN2 will probably do it. But like, I don't know what it brings. But that might be my approach if I'm the commissioner. Like, you need to do something engaging probably with your broadcasts is probably the first step. Changing the broadcast format to be something more engaging with like a younger audience. That's probably the approach I would take. Like, make it fun. I don't know what that looks like necessarily, but you have to do something different if you really want to drive eyeballs.
Interviews on the sideline of players. They had us in the first half. You know, go talk to everybody. It seems really popular with the XFL. Isn't that what they do now? They literally talk to players like right after a drive.
I think that'd be cool. I mean, some of the AFL stuff has like worked. So I think taking from there is not a bad approach.
And somebody else had just asked about the comparison between the proposed college football playoff changes, and they kind of referenced the European Soccer Super League. And they were just asking for clarification on that and to ask if we agreed, since Matt and I specifically are big soccer fans. I know also you're a big fan of the Bees there, Moxley, but maybe not European soccer at large. You're so focused on your favorite team. So just to give a little insight into that. So the European Super League was an idea that was basically tossed around by a couple of the world's largest clubs, where they essentially were saying, we're not making enough money. Let's try to make it where everybody leaves their national league. So we don't play in Spain anymore. The big team in Germany doesn't play in Germany anymore. You actually just play in a league with like all the other top teams, and that's it. I'll tell you, we were probably 48 hours away from people being dragged in the street and killed. So it will never, ever happen in a bajillion years. Literally, like they would have gone and killed a bunch of the people that run these clubs. That's what it is over there. So a little bit of a different situation here, but basically they just wanted to say like the Super League comparisons are basically like the Big Ten SEC stuff. Like, they're just going to branch off and create their own 40 team thing. And then everybody else can kind of, F off. I think that's less likely to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that it'll be those two. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, you can finish your thought. I was just going to say I disagree.
I don't think that those two will break off. I would not be surprised if at some point the
P4
the P4 breaks off. I actually think that's more realistic. I think they will at some point break off and not have the NCAA, and we will get to a commissioner that runs it. And again, I think, and there's a lot of people who are very smart in college football talking about that, it's going to move more and more closer to a more NFL style kind of scheduling, off season, everything, which I don't also think is going to be a horrible thing for the sport overall, but I don't think it's just going to be those two. I think it will be the Power Four altogether that likely that happens. And I would not be surprised if that happens before 2030. Maybe it's right after with the ACC, because I still think they will want some of the ACC schools just because of the revenue that they will bring in. But I think that will happen.
The renegotiation of the ACC, what the buyout looks like, makes it feasible pretty much whenever, or like 2029, I think. My thought on this is it's inevitable that there's some sort of league above. There's at least 2 leagues of what we currently know as the FBS. I think the top league is schools who are like serious football schools. I don't know if schools like Duke are included in that. They might be with how much money they spent, but like that's the type of profile that I don't know makes it to that league. I think if you are a serious football school, you're there, and that might only be 62 schools in the country, 65 schools in the country. I think that is probably realistic, because what you're asking from those schools is then some sort of probably employment agreement. These will be actual employees, not somebody who like nothing probably close to our current idea of what a student athlete is, but collective bargain probably is another part of this. Like there is not an appetite for 135, 136 FBS schools to be collectively bargaining with employees, right? There's barely probably an appetite for like 65. Yep. That's what's going to happen. Inevitably. Like, I just don't think there's another path forward. So yeah, I mean, the idea of a super league, it's probably very similar, but yeah, I wouldn't limit it to just the Big 12 and the SEC. They'll just
be more robust than that.
Yeah, they'll just pick the schools that they want from the other programs. Miami, Clemson, North Carolina, probably a couple of schools from the Big 12, right? Like that's what maybe Boise will be included. Maybe Tulane will be included. Probably not, but like it will be a handpicked group of schools who make enough money and have a commitment to football to do it. Like the schools they'll probably spend up for the settlement, which is like $20 million. Like if you're doing that, then yeah, you're probably serious.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to be that, because even with the Super League, it was what were they talking about? Realistically, it was like 20 teams.
Yeah, it was supposed to be 20 teams. So
yeah, I mean, I think Brentford was just on the outside. They were just on the outside. Yeah, I think Chris is probably right on the number there. I think it's going to be close to 60 teams. Because the other thing is, like, I think they'll want teams that are serious about football, but I also think they're going to want teams that are going to go in there and still kind of collect checks and lose. Like, I don't think they're going to want everybody in there to just be teams that they're not going to want. I think like the SEC and Big Ten will fight back on it just being the top end schools. They'll want teams in there that will probably still not be that good overall.
Mississippi State ain't going nowhere. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Illinois. Well, Illinois was actually pretty good. That was an unnecessary shot. I don't know. Bad team. Purdue. There we go.
South Carolina in bad years.
The Purdue's of the world will still be there. Yeah. So I think it'll be closer to 60 teams, and who knows what that looks like. I would not be surprised too if they almost break that away too, from not just 4 big conferences. They split that up even more, change it. Like
it's going to be hilarious that we're going to have a Pac-12 again. We're going to have a Pac-12 again.
Yes. Yeah. It'd be like Oregon, Washington, USC, like the good old days.
Yeah.
UCLA. Yeah. We're going to have Washington. We're going to have Pac-12 again. It's going to be fun.
It'll be. I think it's worse for the sport, but that's a conversation for a different day.
All right, and we mentioned resetting the table in the intro here, and I had a little bit of a thing written out here, but we do have a little bit of an announcement, and just too long didn't listen. We're not going anywhere, so we're not saying goodbye here. That's not what we're about to do. When we started this, I'm not going to read what I wrote, though. When we started this show about 4 years ago at this point, we were Debbie Debate, if you weren't around for those days. It was something fun to do on Wednesday nights, me, Matt, and Felix, and Chris sprinkled in after, a few months. We'd bring him on here or there. And it has been a lot of fun doing the show at 9:30 live for all you guys. The show has changed a little bit over the years. I think if you listen to this show and have listened since the beginning, you probably know, at the beginning, literally every single show, are you ready for the Debbie Debates? We'd say it, and then we would have debates. It was a debate format show focusing primarily on the Debbie format. Well, now we're a part of the Campus to Canton podcast network. It's very difficult for us to continue to operate in a Debbie C2C tilt without just talking about the same topics that other shows in this network are. We've got other shows that specialize in Campus to Canton. We've got shows that specialize in best ball, in Devi, in CFF, and any of these kinds of things. But what we really don't have is a kind of national C2C show, as it relates to college football at large. So that's where we are going to be heading with this show moving forward. It's not going to be a huge change. We're still talking college football. We're probably going to be talking a little less fantasy, although obviously still with a fantasy tilt to it, because the network doesn't have that show. And as we have done for the past 4 years or 3 years or whatever, we are the chameleons of the group that can kind of change based on what is needed here on this platform. And quite frankly, 9:30, very tough for us to continue to do that every single night. We're not getting any younger. 9:30 live shows are a young man's game. That ain't us anymore. We've all got families. We've all got spouses. We've all got, most of us have kids, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to be going a little bit earlier. We're going to be a more national show. And one of the things we've really prided ourselves on, I think we've missed one show in about 4 years.
Yeah.
We're going to take a couple weeks off. Between building a business, again, families, other obligations. These are not our full-time jobs, even though we wish they were. And we really need a couple of weeks break after finishing this freshman guide. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Still the same show, still Wednesday nights, just a little bit earlier. It's still going to be us. And I think that's our announcement. So we hope you guys will stick around. I don't think really, the tone of the show is going to change at all or anything like that. I think we'll bring back more reoccurring segments and some bits. I think we're going to dip back into that bag of tricks. I think it's going to be better for everybody. So we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Thank you guys for your support over the past 3 3/4 years. Hopefully we're still here another 3 3/4. But until then, guys, Kirk, sorry, ran out of time. We'll get you rescheduled. Matt, Chris, Austin, Felix not here, but I know he's wishing everybody the best as well. Good night and good luck.